Hello, most welcome to H944, and today we'll try for the first time to connect Susie Frobel with quantum mechanics, and therein lies the promise of a possible approach to quantum mechanics that is, for my view, completely novel, all new, and so far it seems very promising because it will be a softer way of going about the subject. It will not be as harsh, and of course this is what we're looking for in the book project, to have something that is not too unappetizing or non-digestible for the public. It definitely have to be something that we possibly can understand. It should not be too abrupt, too negative, too cut off from the world, or too unacquirable, if that is even a word, I would say. According to fractality, we have something called the Heideggerian cut, the Heisenberg cut, the Rösler cut. We have all different sorts of cut. These different sorts of cut are not as sharp as the Cartesian cut, nor are they as sharp as the quantum mechanical complementarity, because that do defy reason and understanding to a certain level. It makes understanding almost inaccessible, and that is the important point. Let me once more make a comparison what was the case with the Swedish school system's food. Colloquially called in Gothenburg Bamba for some mad reason, I never understood why. This food was very unappetizing, although it contained all the necessary vitamins, proteins, carbohydrates, salt, minerals, and what else you could be in need of. But it doesn't get nutritious until it enters the belly of the kid, and that did not happen at any level of frequency. So they changed course into something more appetizing and digestible. This thing could actually be not only a way of making it much more appetizing, it is for me, for my sake, it is much more encompassing, comprehensive, and it's in many facets much easier to start with, because you can do it on a scale. You do not have to make a quantum leap, so to speak, which is a very good phrase, because that has actually entered into the vernacular. And I would say that such a quantum leap is not really possible either. So this is a bit of despair I felt in this idea. And that was, to what degree is it really possible to make the quantum leap of going directly into quantum mechanics? For most quantum physicists that I've been discussed with, talked with, approached, and also what I read in the literature, it shows quite clearly that even for them that had it as their main subject, it took years. And then you have to understand they were working with it round the clock. And they had also as their outmost goal to understand it. It's part of the curriculum, part of the course, part of their exam. part of their work. So you have like at least 5 factors that a regular layman do not have. And maybe one of those most important factors is time. Would you be willing to spend round the clock for 5 years to understand quantum mechanics? To sort of ease the understanding into your system, but in a shock like wave that you just have to accept it. And then all of a sudden, once you are riding your motorbike on the countryside of the hills of Sörmland or something like that, all of a sudden you stop your motorbike and you realize you had an epiphany. Now you understand quantum mechanics and everything changes. That is something I heard a couple of times. How they strive, they do the mathematics, they do the work. Work in that sense, it is part of the schooling, part of the university, MIT, Berkeley, or whatever it was. And I think that is 2 advantages here that we need to consider. One is that you don't know where it's getting at. You just do your regular job, and you do it part-wise, a little by little. And you don't have any press on you to really understand the whole picture. You can do a little by little by little. And somewhere in your mind, it all adds up, and comes the understanding after 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. I think the longest I heard was 12 years. And I would say it even helps that you don't actively try to understand it. Instead, you do the work. This is a most important part of the understanding, I would say. And without it, understanding do not even come, I would assume. At least it would be very hard to getting closer to it. And in both these cases, fractality comes in as a savior. And I don't want to give too much enthusiastic approach here, but Susie Froebel's book has been shown to be more and more promising. And in contradistinction to the book of Rodolphe Gachet and that one from Robert Magliola, it is also a good thing because she introduces us to, for me, a very unknown subject or subject-like thing, a new area, and she introduces people like Bujaki, which I encountered before, but also people like Rössler, and I think when I realized this is very close to the approach we've been doing before with the Klein bottle, this must be something very good. And rather of having 2 completely different perspectives, quantum mechanics versus the regular worldview and the Cartesian cut, she tries to show that there is a fluency here rather than an absolute. And also something that sort of shocked me in the beginning, that was not something I like to take into my system, and that was the very thing that all previously criticized models are actually part of understanding as well. So they are all part of knowledge, part of human endeavor, or things that are both out there and in there. And that came almost like an epiphany, because I had not previously realized we could not strictly say that is not part of knowledge. That would put you into a difficult spot. And that difficult spot is that it will block out understanding for how knowledge could be like almost soft and lucid, changeable, movable, not as strict as before, and rather what is that comes into question here, and what is sort of opened up, is not that it would be it's not an argument Susie Frobel have in the same way we used before, that a Cartesian cut is wrong, and it would not be the book title of Damasio, Descartes' mistake. Instead, it would rather show Cartesian viewpoint is one of many, and that there is flexibility, whether you say it's an absolute cut or it's a more relative cut, or that you can also sort of move where you put your point. And this larger flexibility is reminiscent also on how Susie Frobel shows time to work. She means that the now with a big N, which I'm already very excited about, and with the capital now with the capital N, is something that could be expanded. It can also be contracted because of the nestings, the projections and the retentions that are constantly made. They add and deepen the situation as to make it more viable, more understandable. So there is a constant change where you put the knife, so to speak, but it's no longer a knife. It is like the blade itself can become broader and more encompassing, because the retention nests into the protension, and that nests into the now, and they are coherently or correspondingly co-working to make some sort of simultaneity. This can be compared to the position where I'm sitting now, where simultaneity for me is when there is in the region of I think it's 20 to 40 milliseconds when it comes to visual things, and its sound, it's just a mere 10 milliseconds. And when the car just passed here, I don't know if you could hear that, it most probably could, that means that the real understanding comes directly of simultaneity. I hear the engine, that's the sound thing, and I see the car moving, and I make a simultaneity out of that. That's a nested now, because the things are not absolutely simultaneously. So it's a fractal working that makes up the simultaneity. And when I understood that, that also opened the way into space. So here, this spot can also be a nested spot, where there and over there are getting nested into each other, and therefore make a broader here, and not as excluded or cut off from the rest of reality. So this, as you see here, it's a much softer take. It wouldn't be Sergio Damasio's Descartes is absolutely wrong. Actually, in this new way of seeing, it wouldn't make any sense to highly criticize Damasio or Descartes, because, as you see, it's just a more narrow take, but it's still a take. So it's not wrong in the sense of being absolutely wrong. It can be expanded. And in this case, the much criticized by me at least 100 times by now, Xenophanes paradox and the paradox of Zenon, are no longer as harsh. I wouldn't say he is absolutely wrong anymore. He comes to wrong conclusion. Of course, it's an reductio ad absurdum in some way, but no longer I would be able to say it's absolutely wrong, and it would also miss the target to criticize it, to turn it upside down. So this softer approach is more about a little by little by little you go closer and closer and closer, and you don't have to get absolutely close, because there are not an importance for this absoluteness anywhere. And I realized all of a sudden this absoluteness that I sort of perceive to be in quantum mechanics is much more, it's softer than previously understood. Sorry. It's more about moving where you put the incision, and the incision itself can broaden. And I think that also goes for knowledge. And now I come to the more stringent, important point here. By me criticizing, I wouldn't say I committed an error, but I go into the error direction by absolutely put poor Descartes on the spot. It is not accurate from the side of knowledge. It is still knowledge. So René Descartes wasn't wrong. It is not about being wrong or right. It is about the situation. And as you normally can say that simultaneity comes when a car passes, the engine is on, and that makes for simultaneity, it depends on the situation. And you see here now, perception becomes more accurate without us having to reinvent an absolutely external world. But as that has really hit me. In ordinary talk, it would make sense to speak about simultaneity without inferring too much about it, without making it too problematic, without going maybe the whole way of Xenon. You could go halfway. For ordinary conversation, it makes absolute sense to speak about cats being either dead or alive. But you can help those people, and including myself of course in this instance, by seeing that it is more movable. Yes, in some instances, in some situation, when you have a house pet called Meow or Mushi, that house pet can in some circumstances only be handled as being either dead or alive. Wouldn't make any sense to say it can be both. But then you twist, you sort of tweak the difference between subject and object, and all of a sudden you can say it's both, depending on the situation. And here comes the point that I missed before, well, I understood now. It was actually, oddly enough, from this very, very different thing about the port of Rotterdam. Nobody knows how knowledge works. It was an excellent pointer that made me understand knowledge much more. But the very understanding that the situation can be tweaked is a more soft approach. And you can do it stepwise. You don't have to do it all at once. And you can actually begin with things that are much more neutral, and this infected cat question, which was actually made from the beginning to be as extreme as possible. So this thought I already had maybe a year ago. why would the most extreme example ever be a convenient way for the common layman to understand quantum mechanics? It has been nagging in the back of my head ever since. It would be a little bit like, oh, you want to learn Arabic? Well, let's start with the most difficult sentence you ever seen. And that's actually happened to me. When I decided which language to study many years ago, just by curiosity, I looked up the most complicated or the most difficult sentence that could ever occur in Arabic. And that shook me so hard. So I went to read Japanese, which turned out to be instead of Arabic, something that I regretted later. I would have actually advanced much more in Arabic than in Japanese. But this initial example defied all reason. And it was a little bit, you have to know the whole grammar of Arabic to know how the vowels are produced in the sentence. So you need to know the language to be able to even pronounce هل تتكلم إنجليزي? Do you speak English? It is not like that. That's the most extreme example of a complete, that where you try to exaggerate the difference. Just as in Hebrew, the Arabic system is a three letter system, and the vowels are coming by themselves because of grammatical things, context within the sentence, one could say. And you can lean into this automatically in a soft way, and you don't have to learn 5,000 rules or anything. These were the ideas I saw to my linguistic takes. But the thing is, the language itself has knowledge, and you ease into this. I've spoken to people who learned Arabic. You don't read or learn rules that governs all these complexities. You ease into it. Soft and soft, without any